back to the channel, friends. I have returned to YouTube. Quick note though, for those of you who were following my weekly uploads last year, I will no longer be uploading weekly. Sticking to that kind of strict schedule turned out to be pretty exhausting. And so what I'm hoping to do this year is do maybe 2 videos a month. And that's not a promise, that's an optimistic estimate. Anyway, we are about a month, just a little more than a month into the new year, and what I want to do is look at some music that just entered the public domain this year. Public domain means no longer under copyright, and no longer under copyright means that if there's a composition that I want to perform publicly or record for public distribution, I don't have to get permission from the composer's estate, or from their publisher, or from whatever music rights management entity manages the rights. Many people don't realize this, but even if you're performing or recording without monetary gain, copyright still applies. You still have to get permission to play a piece of music that's under copyright, and royalties may still have to be paid. Now, depending on where you're performing, the host organization might have a blanket copyright agreement already in effect. But if you're like me and you're an independent operation on a shoestring budget, you're going to make life a lot easier for yourself if you just stick to public domain repertoire. So when does something enter the public domain? In Canada, it's 50 years after the composer's death. In most of Europe, it's 70 years. Here in the US, well, it's complicated. But without going down the rabbit hole of legal history, as of 2019, everything that was published at least 96 years ago is public domain. So in 2019, everything that was published first in 1923 became public domain. In 2020, everything published in 1924. And the big news of 2020 was that the single and double piano versions of George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue had finally entered the public domain. The version of Rhapsody in Blue that you're probably familiar with is the orchestration by Ferde Grofe, and that unfortunately is still under copyright worldwide. But if you want to take a whack at the solo version in public, you may now do so completely legally. So for 2021, it's, in the US anyway, it's everything that was published in 1925. And I have the list here from imslp.org. And while there's nothing on this list that's quite as iconic as Rhapsody in Blue, there are quite a few treasures, and I'll just pick a few that jumped out at me. For example, here's Leopold Godowsky's Java Suite, which was the result of him taking a trip to Indonesia and listening to a lot of gamelan music, and he tried to translate what he heard into pianistic terms. If any of you are from Indonesia, you can let me know whether he did a good job or not. This is how the first movement begins. For contrast, here is the second movement, which is titled, what's it called? Here it is. Puppet Shadow Plays. I'm not quite sure what the reference is here, but this is how it goes. Definitely check out the whole thing. It's got 12 movements in all. The next sample is a Nocturne by Cecile Chaminade, which surprised me because I was under the impression she had lived early enough that all of her stuff was already public domain, but apparently not. This is her Nocturne in B major, opus 165. And then there's a middle section contrasting. Here it is. It's a great little piece. Next, I want to play a couple of orchestral works that were on this list. One is the Third Symphony by Karol Zimanovsky, who's one of those composers that I hear about all the time, but whose music I never really knew. And this Third Symphony of his is a setting of a poem by the 13th century Persian poet Jalal ad-Din Rumi, and it was translated into Polish for this symphony. So it is actually a choral symphony, and it's a wonderfully spooky piece. This is my best attempt at a piano transcription. And then the singers enter, but I can't sing, so just try to imagine that's what I'm doing. Definitely listen to the whole thing. It's quite an experience. But I think the big news of 2021 for orchestral repertoire is going to be Artarino Respighi's Pines of Rome. And I'll play you one of the best known passages. This is from the last movement, which depicts a Roman army marching home after a military victory. really want to do a transcription of the entire piece, but that will have to wait for another video. Anyway, there are plenty of other great pieces on this list, but I'll let you explore them all for yourselves. See you next video. I'm Ben, signing off.